Hello and welcome to the International Schools Podcast. My name is Dan Taylor.
My name is John Micton. Join us twice a month at the International Schools Podcast as we have conversations with international school leaders, educators, and entrepreneurs working and engaging in the world of international schools and education.
And finally, just to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, ASA for Education, for making this podcast happen. Now on to the episode. Cool, guys. Welcome to the International Schools Podcast. I thought we'd do a school closures episode. We've actually done 4 of these before. This is actually number 5. I only realized when I checked. And the first one was our most popular episode ever by a long way of all the podcasts. And we've had a precipitous decline after that. I think, so I want to retain some of the former glory. The first one got picked up by the IB. Do you remember that? The International Baccalaureate featured it as one of their reference points for dealing with lockdowns and teaching and stuff. So we had a lot of people listen to that, which was really cool. But I think we've had really good feedback on the other episodes. So first of all, welcome back, Tim.
Hi.
We had a few different people on these, but Tim and Jason were on the first couple. I'm just trying to add Jason now. And then, Jason's here, great. And then James, who's my colleague at AppsEvents, who I don't think you've been on any of these episodes yet, have you, James?
I think I was one of the first couples. Can't remember, Dan. I've been on a few episodes with you, Dan. Not really sure. Didn't want to that one.
Exactly. Cool, guys. So, I mean, just a quick casual catch-up, really. The format of this episode was, we just talked about, the lockdown situation, what changes everyone's made at their schools and everything, both in technology and, mental health, everything. And then we came back at different times when different things were happening. Schools were opening and closing again. So we haven't done it for a while. And we've now got a lot of changes in the world. Obviously, Asia is still fairly locked down in places, in and out of lockdown. Europe and the US are fairly open. So just wanted to have a catch up. So long introduction. But first of all, Tim, how's it going in Hong Kong? What's the latest situation there?
Yeah, hey Dan, hi everyone. It's so currently in school. It's been, as I've heard a few times mentioned here, it's like a roller coaster. And sometimes you don't know if we're at the top or at the bottom, what have you. But at the moment, I feel we're on the way down in a positive way. So we're back in school now. We have been for about a week. We've just come in off a 14 weeks school closure, and where everyone just pivoted back online for the 4th time we've done it. I remember that first conversation we had. We were thinking, this will only last 6-7 weeks or something. But how
is that like? I mean, is it? What's the general? I mean, the first question, I guess, jumping in anyone else. What's the general feeling among the staff? Because 14 weeks is a long time, and we talked about it before. In Hong Kong, people live in pretty small apartments. Most people, unless you've got a lot of money. I think what's it just like?
The city itself, the lockdown was, if I can call it, a light lockdown, as in there were just restrictions. You could still go out for food. Restaurants were closing at 6. I'm the same as yourself, Dan. Got a young family. 6 o'clock, we're ready for home anyway. So it's that idea that we could still enjoy that. We could go out for coffee and things. So that aspect of life could continue. Just schools were closed. The first time we went online, it was a bit of a novelty. It was a bit of an excitement. What does this look like? But this time it was a definite change of feeling, in the sense that we know children are missing out. We didn't want it at all. And we couldn't wait to get kids back. And even the excitement when we came back was different. Kids were so excited to be back on campus, where before there'd been an aspect of fear, unknown, of coming back together as a community. But this time, no, it was people just wanted to try and get back to some sort of normality.
Yeah, I mean, Hong Kong's been one of the strictest places in the world, hasn't it? I mean, I think obviously Australia, China, there's not many other countries that are that level of strictness on the lockdown.
I mean, as I said, we've continued our life as normal, really, for a couple of years. The only thing that we weren't able to do was travel. And at the beginning, that started to take its toll. But at the beginning, it was fine. We could continue with life and everything. So there was never, ever a harsh lockdown. The big one was schools. Schools are closing.
Were you going to work and working from school, or were you at home most of the time?
To begin with, yeah, we were going into school and everything. I found myself personally, I was more productive. I got more stuff done in school. Again,
Yeah.
with a young family at home, it's different. But then the actual government recommended work from home for everyone. So
Right.
all government officials, anything that was office based, they encouraged people to work from home. And as soon as that was recommended, that's when school followed suit. Then.
Great. Yeah. What about you, Jason? How's things in South Korea?
Hey man, yeah. Hope you guys can hear me okay. Sorry about the video. But
Yeah, no problem.
so actually a little different from what Tim's experienced. We have been in some form of, I guess you'd call it hybrid or distance learning for 26 months. And so I would say in the last 6 weeks, we've been allowed to go back 100% to school. But yet we also are on the back end of the spike, and they've opened up. In fact, this week was all restrictions in the whole country were lifted except masks. And so all the gatherings could happen again. Everything could happen except we still have to wear masks, of course, around. And so, but we still have kids out. And so they're sort of video chatting into and watching the lessons take place at school, but we are back in school 100%. And I don't think we'll ever go any other way at this point, just because that's the government's like, we're kind of done with this. We want to move on. But we do have a very, very high vaccination rate and boosters. And there's people who've been getting their second booster now, the older folks. So I think that's a part of it too, is there's been community buy-in to, the effectiveness of the different things. And so even my young son is getting his vaccines now. And so, yeah, things are better. I would say people have really pushed to get back in school. But yeah, just like Tim, it was a lot of excitement once we could get back online on campus. And it was disappointing when we couldn't be. So yeah, that's kind of where we are, man. That's kind of where we are.
Yeah. John, how's it going? Just got joined by John.
Sorry, I saw a meet link, so I went to the meet link.
No problem at all. John, good time for you to join in. Perfect time, because we're just talking about the lockdowns and things and what the situation is in the different countries, in Hong Kong and South Korea. And you're in Luxembourg. What's the situation with schools and everything there over the past few months? I think it's fairly open now, isn't it?
We're just back to normal. As of last Carnival break, we stopped having to wear masks. They passed a law that you don't have to wear masks anymore, except in public transport, medical centers, physiotherapists, and senior citizens' homes.
Interesting. James, what about Thailand? Obviously, you're involved with a lot of schools, with AppsEvents. What are you seeing there with the schools now? It's Thailand's been kind of up and down, hasn't it, in terms of opening up and closing?
Thailand's followed a similar model, I think, to Korea. So you still have a mask mandate. Schools are hybrid learning. But I think a lot of the international schools got back to hybrid learning in probably October of 21. But a lot of the Thai schools have been closed for over 18 months, the Thai national schools, for over 18 months.
That's just almost unimaginable, isn't it? And how have they been doing any teaching, or have they? Does it vary from school to school and teacher to teacher? What's your impression of the local Thai schools?
Well, yeah, it varies very much depending on school to school. I mean, Thailand has got. Really, you have Bangkok. You have major cities are very, very different to the country areas. So outside of Bangkok, I think those schools are really struggling with putting material together. Whereas schools in Bangkok, they obviously have better internet. Teachers are better trained, have got more resources. What they found was they started putting out lessons online for students nationally, so nationwide, and they were doing this on TV and on via the internet. And I found that a lot of students in rural areas didn't have access to a TV and didn't have access to the internet either. So really, it's a tale of two worlds in Thailand. I think if you're in Bangkok, you're very well catered for, but outside of that, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure. I can't even imagine it, because I know. I mean, even some Western countries. I mean, in the US, like I know California, the schools stayed closed for. I don't know if anyone knows how long it was, but it was a long time.
They're open again, Dan. I know
they are open again, but they stayed closed a lot longer than the other states, didn't it?
Absolutely. I think till the end of last October, my nephew's at San Francisco High School, and I think I think after Christmas they came back face to face, but before that, some schools were still online. I think it depended on the state, maybe.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm in Bahrain at the moment. I was actually at St. Christopher's school this morning, and here everything's open. No masks anywhere. Well, everything's not open because it's Ramadan, but that's not COVID related. But it's no masks. Everything's normal. And the UK as well. I was in the UK recently, and in London for Bet show, and the only time I wore a mask was on the plane. I got off the plane in the airport, no mask on the tube, no mask in the Ubers, no mask at the trade show. There were some people wearing masks, but I'd say 95% weren't. So the picture's a lot brighter. All of us are actually not in lockdown. It's the first time ever we've run this call with nobody in any kind of lockdown. What have people found? And guys, jump in. This is a very casual chat, so I don't want to dominate this, but what have people got in terms of like plans for hybrid learning and for potential returns to lockdown? I know it varies from school to school. Like for example, in the UK, all schools have to have a plan for contingency teaching for lockdown and hybrid. What do you all have? Have you all got plans now for lockdown, or for a hybrid situation, or are you forgetting about a situation where you might have kids in the class and kids at home? So yeah, I'm just keen to find out what you're all thinking and what your latest plans are for the future. John, do you want to jump in first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we have a lockdown policy, we have a hybrid, and we have all this good documentation, and a lot of stuff has been adapted based on parent feedback, student feedback. I think we're far better positioned to come back into this situation again. We've learned a lot. I think just the capacity to listen to parents and staff and students, which maybe we didn't at the beginning, really leveraged the flexibility, and I think the more meaningful learning that occurred from that point. So I think for us, we're hoping to be back to normal. I mean, we are now, whatever normal is. We're definitely the Ukrainian crisis. We've taken on Ukrainian students. That is a new thing that's kind of percolated up, and I think a lot of people in Europe are, there's a bit of edge, and we're kind of shifting. Our COVID task force team now is a crisis management team, and we're trying to accommodate the Ukrainian community here in Luxembourg as best as we can with having kids coming to our school, et cetera, et cetera. But I think for us, we have these plans. Definitely we'll be going back and looking at them, but we feel that we're in a position, if that should happen again, we've learned a lot. And we're maybe more nimble and are going to be more mindful of how that feedback loop is critical, because every situation will be different. We won't have COVID again, but we'll have something. I think that's the nature of the world that we live in with climate change, is that the as the economist said, predictable unpredictability. That's what we're trying to strategize for. What does it look like to be a school when you're guaranteed there's going to be unpredictability keep coming to you, and how nimble and flexible are you?
John, are you trying to do any hybrid teaching in a sense of like, if a child has COVID, they can join via Meet, and you'll have, using smartboards or whatever. Are you going that far, or are people either in the class, or if they're out for any reason, they get their materials?
So currently, because if you have COVID, the isolation has changed completely. But what we were doing, we had a tipping point. If we had X amount of students out in isolation, then we would flip to online learning. And we actually assigned an educator to coordinate that. But we use Seesaw and Schoology. So even prior to COVID, we had a culture of kids going to Seesaw and Schoology. Seesaw is a LMS really targeted to younger kids, and Schoology is another LMS. So we already had a culture of people, when people are absent, or we have some kids that are in sports and they might have a sporting training program that doesn't allow them to always be at school. Teachers are very good with that. So I think there was already a culture. We definitely got much better at it. And I think we understand it's far more complex But right now, we're not doing anything special. And if a kid is absent, they can always go to their Schoology.
How does that work, though, John? You said it, so if a certain percentage are off, then you switch to online. So let's say 50% of the class are off. So
we go to hybrid. Sorry. We go to hybrid.
Yes, but the rest of the children come into the class with their laptops and the teaching, and the teacher's there. Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah. But we're not doing that now. That was during COVID. We're not doing that currently because we don't have the isolation rules have changed, so it's not as demanding on absences.
Yeah. Great. Tim, what about you?
Echo what John mentioned about feedback. I mean, when this happened back in 2020, February 2020, it hit Hong Kong. It was completely unprecedented. We didn't know what we were really getting into. So it was we had a week to prepare. So that's completely changed with every wave, as we're calling it here. And we reflect on how it went, again, taking on teachers, student, parent feedback, looking at how to change and things like that. And then that unpredictability, that's one thing we've definitely learned, how to adapt quickly. We've literally done it in the last 2 weeks again, where we've gone into this semi-hybrid model where we've got 2 or 3 students from each class missing. So we're looking at ways of accommodating them. We're actually getting them into the classroom as well, on a Google Meet with teachers and providing, we use Google Classroom and also Seesaw resources for them to work on at home. When it comes to plans for the future, we're trying to encourage and get as many students back on campus as possible. But the idea then of, you mentioned if someone's off with COVID, well, what happens if they're off for surgery for 2 weeks? So we're having that conversation at the moment, because we're not wanting, if the student's off sick, even that sickness are they able to participate? Are they not able to participate? So there's so many variables to consider there. At the moment, our focus is students are back on campus. We haven't seen them for 4 months. We're really trying our best to accommodate them and support them, not just with curriculum, but with everything that's going on. And at the moment, we're just trying to get students in the classroom so there's eyes and ears, so they can feel part of the community. Because it's almost we're starting the community building process again. It feels like it's September the 1st because we haven't seen students for so long. And those pre-primary grade 1, grade 2 students have never had proper school. They've never, our grade 3 students have not been part of an elementary school. So it's bigger than just like, we're going to do this. We really have to take our time and see.
Yeah, I think that's kind of amazing to think that you have a cohort of kids, which is, you think of schooling as kind of just everybody has that experience, going to classroom, walking to school or whatever. That's just amazing. And I love the way you guys are talking about, you said, September 1st, we're building, it's like September 1st, we're rebuilding the community. That's very powerful.
I was chatting to one of our PE teachers, and he had a grade 2 students, and they just came into the arena, the sporting arena, and they just walked in, and he said it was like lambs just walking in. They'd never been in that environment. So where they'd normally say, right, there's a basketball, there's a football, they didn't know how to do that. So it's that whole skill building of collaboration, teamwork, communication. None of this is non-curricular stuff. This is stuff now that we're really having to build, and we're lucky as a school, as a community, we're focusing on that to hopefully build up those skills. So come next September the 1st, we're slightly in a better position.
So what happened to him? Hong Kong, the government announced some kind of fairly bizarre last-minute thing. They were going to switch the summer holidays to be like 5 months early. Did they backtrack?
Yeah, there was a bizarre 48 hours where this announcement had been made, and then international schools got together and said, look, we can't do this because there's so many things involved with IB, with IGCSE, with students needing to do certain things by a certain date to go on to college and things like that. So they were then exempt. So we continued with online as we were doing before.
Yeah. Interesting. What are in Bahrain is interesting. I think I mentioned this to some of you before. Here, the government made a law that all, at least in the state schools, I think in the international schools, that every lesson has to be taught hybrid. So every teacher has to be ready for children who can't make it. And I believe the children can even decide from lesson to lesson if they come or not, or they go from home. So I can't even. We were talking to one school, helping them out. We were just giving them some advice on using Google Meet and how it could work with projectors and things like that. But that would be a tough. Has anyone heard of any schools doing something similar to that?
I've never heard anything like that. No.
I think the hybrid was definitely the thing that teachers found the most challenging. We had this rotation, A-B rotation for a while. And I know our lower school primary teachers, and rightly so, because they had 50% of the kids in the class and 50% at home and just toggling between the two. And almost you had to create almost two different lessons, even though they were all together, virtually or non-virtually. So I think that really requires a lot of support, and just emotionally and physically, I think it's quite demanding on teachers.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a tough ground as well, because then all of a sudden you may have a family say, look, we're going to head down to Phuket for 2 weeks because it's cheaper for us to travel at this moment in time because we know you offer a hybrid model. So we're going to jump on that. It can get really, this grey area at the moment. It's that, and John mentioned if you've got COVID, well, what if you've just got the flu, or you've twisted your ankle, or it's raining this morning, so I'm going to stay at home and I'll jump online. It's unprecedented.
It's interesting. You mentioned the Phuket thing. I was actually reading an article last night about there's a big rise in these online international schools. I actually met a guy in Prague recently who's founded one of them, and a lot of families now, I think, just because I think it all came in the uncertainty, they were like, well, we'll just do this and we can, live somewhere else, whatever. And a lot of, I actually know 2 people now whose kids are in online international schools, and then, the parents are making an effort to get them in local sport. And I wonder if that's going to continue if we go to a sort of post-COVID world, or if there'll be an increase in parents saying, look, I'll do the homeschool, invite an online school, and I'll organize the extracurricular activities myself. What do you guys think?
I think that's a possibility, Dan. I mean, I think that there's a lot of really high quality online institutions out there. And I think they rose sort of to prominence during this time. And I think the thing you're missing, though, is that social interaction. I mean, I'm kind of somewhere between what John's talking about and what Tim's talking about, because I was talking to my grade 10s this week, and we said, their last real school year was grade 7. Because the last 3 years have been interrupted and started and restarted, and they were actually kind of mind blown to think that, because they were like, wow, actually, yeah, I was in the middle of middle school when the last time I had a full school year without some interruption. And so I think, similar situation to what Tim's talking about, what John's talking about, we've had to have this conversation of a student decided that their parents decided to take them to Spain for 2 months. And then do they get credit for time they weren't there? Can they get exempt? Can they retake the test? All these different things. I mean, we're getting into some pretty murky water, actually, because, the child didn't really have a chance and opportunity to say one way or the other. And heck yeah, they want to go to Spain, right? Or whatever. So, I mean, I think I'm kind of in that same boat. But yeah, the online presence of schools but there's a lot of bad ones out there too. I think that's probably part of the problem.
They're definitely, yeah, you can read online. I mean, even the guy I met in Prague, I'm not sure how great his school is, to be honest. There's definitely a huge, but it's got to the point now, I'm getting adverts on, maybe it's my children are sort of school age now, I'm getting adverts on YouTube for online international schools, like as pre-roll ads. I mean, it's got to the point when it's becoming a big thing,
Well, Khan Academy just released World School. I don't know if you saw it, with the Arizona State University. Yeah. So it's a global school that will be launched. It's called Khan World School. So basically, as I watched him talk about, there was so much demand, and basically they're very likely going to replicate some of the Khan Academy pedagogic structures, but make it a school. And Arizona State University, I think, will give some accreditation or something. And so I think what you're saying is the market is there. I know the International School of Bern in Switzerland, they have a online school, and they're a brick and mortar school.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. Like even Harrow, the independent school in the UK, is doing online IGCSEs and ALevels now, and they've got a whole thing. It's very expensive to register for, but so even the kind of the brand name schools are getting into this. I mean, Personally, for me with children, I can't imagine anything worse unless I absolutely had to do this. I would hate it. But I know for some people.
I'm wondering,
here.
Tim,
go on.
in Asia, are schools thinking about having an online component long term? So they're saying we provide the brick and mortar, but guess what? As an added value to our offerings, we have an online version that you can tap into.
Yeah, it's interesting. But our school's part of the Cognitive Schools group, so they've set that up now, targeting Chinese market as well. They've got a couple of courses, couple of schools that are focused on developing English levels, with then the hope of getting them into a cognitive school in the region. I know some in North Anglia as well. So I think it's almost like race to the moon, isn't it? That I think all the schools groups now have noticed that there's a definite potential for this. I've seen adverts from people looking for teachers as well online, and they're selling it. Look, you can work from anywhere in the world and everything like that. So they're looking for people to build programs and stuff. But no, I know Cognita here. That's what they've put one together, and I think they're doing one in Europe as well.
John,
Sorry, James.
Yeah, I just picked up SoCan World School. Halfway down their page, they say, what type of student is this school designed for? And they say highly engaged, self-driven, and enthusiastic. What percentage of students does that really cater for?
Not my children.
There might be a parent behind them that's highly engaged because their bank balance will be better. I think that's where the engagement might come.
Yeah.
But actually, back to what Tim was just saying, because I know, Tim, you worked in Thailand before as well. And so, I've been in Thailand for 20 years, and we've had closures due to floods shutting down Bangkok for 3 to 4 months. We've had several political coups where the army was on the street for several months as well. And so Thailand education is kind of be in this mindset already of having these big shutdowns. If you look, and John, you mentioned about climate change, Philippines, obviously having typhoons, and even Hong Kong, you have, red warnings or black warnings?
Yeah, we have the red and amber rain, black rain, but also the typhoons then. Yeah.
So I think a lot of schools in Asia are kind of familiar with this, with these extended already.
The other thing which is interesting is because like the last time we spoke, it was I think it was maybe 8 months ago, and then we were talking about, there was a trend people were talking about where a lot of international school enrollments were going down. Teachers were saying they didn't want to return. They had too much time away from family. But that's all reversed. There was a couple of articles recently. There was an ISC report that just came out, which is record enrollments for international schools. If you look, especially in the Middle East, it's the highest it's ever been. And in Asia, apparently, most countries have full enrollment, and there's even new schools opening now in China. So that's what's been a strange reversal for me, which I thought this was potentially going to sort of reduce the growth or reduce the size of the international school sector, but it's actually gone the other way, which is kind of bizarre.
I'm wondering if those movements are because maybe international schools, infrastructure-wise and with online learning, are more nimble and adapt than the local systems, and parents are realizing that to leverage their kids' education, they might be better off going to an international school that has more aptitude, and maybe not some of the challenges that local public schools have. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I can add to that, John. Jay Preeb over at NIST, he said exactly that. Their enrollments were skyrocketing for that very reason. They wanted a school which had a very strong plan for hybrid or online learning.
Okay.
Yeah, we had record number of enrollment applications this year for very few spots. I think, too, you have to take into account a lot of the governments of some of these countries are allowing more attendance. So I know when I lived in China, there were certain restrictions, and now there's a lot of these quote unquote bilingual schools that are coming up in China. And so I know Tim definitely knows what I'm talking about there. And so what it is that those are local students who are allowed to go to a quote unquote international style education. A lot of them are boarding schools and that kind of thing. So those numbers are growing, but I think it's a little deceiving because it's not the traditional growth of international schools like expats moving into countries for other kind of work. I think a lot of it is, like you said, folks that are wanting a different kind of education for their student, right? And so, yeah, definitely. I know the growth is pretty astronomical here in Korea.
Yeah, well, I think that's That's the other thing this ISC report was saying. I mean, we talked with Denry Machin on this podcast, who's an expert in kind of the business of international schools, and that kind of view of the expat being the main parent in international schools is kind of long gone. It's mostly, I think it was 80% or 80-something% local families now. But a lot of these new schools are kind of mid-tier schools, lower fee income, which I personally think is a great thing. It's given that, same opportunity to parents who are not, a lot of international school kids, either the parents' company's paying for it or they're a higher income family. Whereas this is a case of, a lot of kind of more mid fee level, which gives a lot of the international mindedness and things you can get from international school to lower income children.
I think it's also the socioeconomic change as well. A shift with the expat community was predominantly Europeans or Americans. That's definitely changing. There's a big shift in that. There's a new generation of wealth in Asia, where I can imagine, James, with you, there's a lot of Thai families now who are able to send their children to international schools. It's happening here in Hong Kong. That idea of they're wanting to offer jobs for local people, upskill local people, so they're now in a position and they're in companies that are offering schooling and things like that. So I think it's just a trend globally of how the wave of money's been moving around.
I think there's a bigger piece here as well. I think a lot of jobs which traditionally went to expats are now being handed to local hires who have studied at international schools or have studied at colleges in the US or the UK or wherever around the world. And now locals are taking up these positions. And now they're looking to get their kids educated to the same level, definitely.
Here they call it Bahrainization or something like that. So it's actually a policy of the government to reduce the number of expats and to get local people into positions. So, there's even like quotas and things on, how many expats per local hire you have. And again, the schools here are all, predominantly local. And actually a lot of Indian schools and a lot of Filipino schools as well. So sort of you've already started to see it was always British or American or IB curriculum, and now you started seeing Canadian, Singapore curriculum, Australian, but now you're seeing a lot more of the kind of Indian and Filipino, the other kind of English language curriculums, which is interesting.
We have an anomaly in Luxembourg where the government, the Ministry of Education, is opening international schools. So there is the local lycées, which is the Luxembourg curriculum, but they've now opened 5 or 7 international schools, some of them doing IGCSE, others doing the European Baccalaureate, and they're full-fledged international schools, English-speaking curriculum that are free. And so because what Luxembourg has to do to keep its pension going, it needs a 2.5% population increase over a certain amount of years. And what they're finding, and I think Tim and James alluded to it, is many of the expats that are coming in, the companies are not giving 36,000 or whatever it might be for fees. So this is also a really attractive thing that the government's doing to attract that skill set, the tech and the finance and all those other things, and providing international schools that are free. You can imagine what that's like when you're one of the few for-profit or non-profit but fee-paying schools and your competition doesn't charge anything. So that's a whole other conversation.
It's fascinating. I mean, that would make a difference. I mean, for someone like me who's paying for international school fees now, that would be a huge reason to go live in Luxembourg. To actually get if it was of the same level as like a ISL kind of education for free, that's a phenomenal deal. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
I think you alluded to it, and is that this, and I thought, Tim, you did a lovely job of explaining that shift, is that there is what may be, when I was a child and there were international schools, they were small, usually it was IBM, Shell, or GM, or whoever it might be, Nestle, and that has changed so much. And I think, that the dynamic is so different than, say, even 10, 15, 20 years ago. And especially with a lot of these companies, for example, you were mentioning your organization, Cognita, that are, have flagship schools around the world, outstanding education, outstanding educators, but, a different approach.
Tim, I've got a question for you because I'm interested about the school groups. Obviously, you work for there's Cognita, there's Nord Anglia, GEMS, a bunch of these schools. How are you finding it? Have they made like global policy? This is how you deal with remote teaching, or just every school just leaves it, figures it out themselves?
Yeah, it's every school to a certain extent, but then there's guidance and support from other schools. And I think that the main reason for that is we're just on different trajectories. We're on different timelines of how Vietnam looks compared to Thailand, compared to Singapore in this region, let alone Europe. I know we supported some European schools because we seem to be like 3 or 4 months are we ahead or behind? I'm trying to think. So we went into lockdown before, so we had the European schools contacting us saying, what were you doing? How did you do it? Kind of thing. But when it comes to policies, it's down to the schools. So I think there's so many variables.
The context is huge.
Yeah, it's we're one-to-one. Where some of the European schools, they are now actually, there was a shift there because of COVID, but it's just different when it comes to things like that. So it's more, there's a community for you to support each other rather than here's a policy and we all should follow.
Picking up on that, Tim, actually, English Schools Foundation in Hong Kong. So I think they have 20 or 20 schools in their district. And
20 or 20. It's the same number.
They were, so the last 2 months, they put out a big contingency plan for all of their schools. And they had sessions of basically all of their students from 3 to 17 years old. There was something online for them. So in the case that a teacher was out sick or a class was cancelled, or perhaps the teachers were out getting vaccinations or whatever was happening in Hong Kong because all the schools were closed, there was another plan, a contingency plan, all online of these online classes hosted by outside providers.
I mean, they're a prime example. If you've got 20 schools doing the same thing 20 times from home, it makes sense to bring all that together. And I know a lot of the ESF schools, their campuses were used. They were going to be used for testing and things like that. So they were slightly different. But I think just that idea of that it can be done is never going right back to what Jason said. That for me, it's those skills, those soft skills, non-curricular skills. I think. Or for me personally, I think they're more important than curriculum myself to develop, especially in this region. Those skills are potentially, there's a lot of room for development there. So going all online, but that idea of coming together as a group, I think it makes perfect sense and share the capacity and the skills that everybody have, because not every teacher feels comfortable developing an online program on Google Sites or even just the content itself and the resources.
Definitely.
Thinking
John,
about that.
The point here? Oh, sorry, James.
Yeah, it's your follow-up question, Tim, on that. Are you thinking about, so obviously with your school, and actually the same to John and Jason, are you looking at skills now for incoming teachers and ensuring that they have the capability to teach online, or they could flip to a hybrid environment quickly? Is that something now you're looking at?
It's something that we look at, not officially. It's not something that we want to say, look, that you need these skills. We share that we use these tools, and an applicant is at an advantage if they can use those tools. It's almost so safe to say that nearly every educator is in a better position when it comes to using tech than they were 2 years ago. I know it is here. With each wave, with each pivot online, our teachers are doing a better job. I mean, I don't think people realize how good a job they're doing. Now they're having to create all these electronic resources where before they could stand up and present, they can use the whiteboard, they can quickly jot them. Now it's completely changed, I think, the whole use of technology in the classroom. But to answer your question, it's not something that we are specifically looking for, but it would be wrong not to look for it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think it's just implied that if you survive COVID, you have some online experience. And what's interesting is I have been interviewing for some positions, and I had a couple candidates that weren't teaching during COVID, and immediately for me that was like, you kind of missed out on a big pedagogic journey. What does that mean in your capacity to understand this whole online thing? Not that meant that they weren't an adequate or a very good pedagogue, but there's something about that shared, that shared experience we've all had, I think is really important when you're recruiting is, have you gone through COVID is almost like a badge, not that it's a badge to celebrate, but I think teachers that have gone, and as Tim is saying, the level of professionalism and dedication and the work that people had to go into was phenomenal. I mean, just the hours teachers have engaged with. And for a lot of our teachers, it was a big shift. Digital literacy was always something that they engaged with, but not at the amplified level that was required to make it really good. And I think everybody has walked out with stronger skill sets. My question is, how do we keep that going? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, now I can chill. And how do you keep that momentum going where you keep amplifying those skills? That's kind of my question that I'm, asking myself.
I'll tell you one thing, John, we're really struggling because of teacher saturation, right? That people they have been in a heightened sense of online identity for a long time now. And so to move beyond just the survival skills of how do I make this iPad work with this app or whatever, it's really interesting to talk about even professional development now that's beyond just survival development, right? And so I think that you bring up a good point, and it may take a few years for us to actually kind of move out of that phase. So really interesting that you brought that up too.
Just want to jump and introduce Dave Freeman. Dave, sorry, I think we got the old link. Dave's a good friend. I don't know who you know James very well. Obviously, you know Tim, I believe. Not sure if you know John.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, Dave.
Yeah,
hey, John.
Dave's out in Taiwan and worked very involved with Morrison for a long time. Now doing some international business. So you were actually invited to the original calls, Dave, but couldn't make it, unfortunately. So it's great to finally get you on, get your perspective too.
Yeah, cheers, guys, and sorry for the miscue of joining in late.
It was my fault. I've confused John as well. So you weren't the only one. So sorry about that. I added a link in late. How's things in Taiwan, Dave? Just generally with COVID and everything. What's the situation with? I know your kids are at Morrison still. What's the situation there?
So you might know from reading in the newspapers that we kind of held off COVID for a long time. Really, I mean, it's the advantages of being on an island, and so and then up until recently there was a few little spikes, but then with Omicron, once the local cases started spreading, they've decided that they're going to let it just slowly go and try to live with it, and they're doing a good job of just managing it, and letting it slowly spread and communicating a lot with these daily meetings with the schools. And it's still a bit of a mess. A lot of the schools are trying to figure out, we're 2 years behind you guys. You guys have already lived through all this. So in a way we can learn, we just, the Taiwanese government just watches what everyone else has done and tries to learn from it. But, it's still tricky, even with all that information out there. So we're right in the middle of it now.
Are the schools open as normal now, like Morrison, for example? What's the situation?
So, they had a 10-day closure because they had a family that was exposed. And then, I mean, you guys, it probably sounds odd to you guys, but it was just one case, but it was
enough. And they closed the whole school. Wow.
Of course, the whole school, 10 days. And they cleaned the school. And, like I said, we're a couple years behind you guys. But Taipei American School, I think, just announced today that they're going completely online because there's a lot of cases here in Taipei, not so many down south in Taichung, but it's a virus. It'll get there, and so everyone's just trying to figure it out one step at a time.
Wow, is that the same for businesses as well? Like in a company, if you get one case, does the office gets closed, or how does that work?
Nah, they're letting companies decide. A lot of companies have we did a bout where we worked from home, all over Taiwan. Everybody kind of had to learn how to do that, but they maxed out at 500 cases in Taiwan, and they had everyone working from home. So we have 23 million people here and 500 cases. Everyone worked from home. So then but then it's okay. That's, you know, you can come back to work. But now everybody's kind of brushing off those skills of, you know, that we picked up a year ago. And companies can choose, but, you know, but I don't know. It's 50-50. 50% of the people are quite worried and, you know, want to work from home. And then 50% are like, you know, should be all right. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
It will be, Dave. It will be all right. We've been there.
Yeah.
What about can you visit? Because obviously I was supposed to be in Taiwan already. You know, do you think they're going to reduce the quarantine and people can actually visit the country again?
I think it's going to happen soon. They just announced today. So kind of a funny thing, when the school had the case, it was right as spring break was starting. So they were calling all of the kids, and they were saying, you know, my son included, and all of them. It says, do you know this kid that got COVID? And the first kid said, yeah, we're good friends. Okay, you need to quarantine for 10 days. And then, do you guys know the kid? And everyone else said, no, we don't actually hang out much. I know he's in one of my classes, but okay, good. You know, so yeah, it's like it's not the best system, but so they were making them, even up till a few days ago. Everyone that came in contact with someone had to quarantine for 10 days. And you could do it in your home, which is new. They had facilities before that. So today they approved.
You had to go quarantine in a special hotel or whatever.
In a hotel, yeah, and it was pretty costly actually. So, but today they approved 3+4, which is you can quarantine at your home for 3 days, and then you just need to do 4 days of self-health management, where you keep an eye on yourself. So hopefully the next step is that they'll take they had a 14-day quarantine, then it was 10 days. So the next step hopefully is, say, Dan wants to come visit, let's make him do a 3-day quarantine. That's a little bit more manageable, right? Then you can get out, do some business, but they haven't done that yet.
Wow, that's hardcore, to be honest. I can't even imagine, like, in one case they close the whole school down. That's like amazing. Yeah, so I think most of the schools it's going to go to, if that stays the same, like you said, Taipei American School has gone fully online. I think more schools are just going to do that, I would imagine. Just get rid of, preempt in one case, they're definitely going to get it.
Yeah. Or they'll change the rules, which they do quite often. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, John, you made a good point in the doc about well-being. I know this is a subject you've thought about quite a bit, about how has it changed or been amplified over the last 2 years. Do you want to lead off on that?
Yeah, I think well-being has always been something that we all agree is important. You know, we all try, and I think all of us who are busy and passionate about what we do is sometimes well-being is not in the forefront, or we think it is, but our body might think differently. It's just interesting how through COVID that really got amplified. And Dan and I had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Helen Kelly. We just did a podcast with Create Positive. It just seems that there has been a high level of burnout, which is something that, you know, you hear about, but it's for me, the first time that I know quite a few of my fellow colleagues that are administrators and leaders in international schools. That seems to have been a theme of, you know, why did it take COVID for us to realize this? And so I really don't have any magic answer, but it's just been interesting how important that's come. And you hear a lot of schools now that well-being is one of their strategic ambitions. And, you know, there's definitely more and more organizations coming out saying, hey, we have a well-being package. So it's just kind of interesting how that now has become far more amplified and far more in the forefront, and especially in international schools. And I think, you know, for definitely, if I think of the environment that I'm in, there is no doubt the hybrid, the on-off, the online, and the back and forth really did take a toll. And the biggest thing, and talking to some friends in Shanghai, you know, there's some people that have had children and they've never seen their grandparents, or people have been married and kids have been born and people have passed away. And I think that in itself adds a real intense layer, that feeling of disconnectivity with your home. And I think that combined with, you know, high demands, and I think teachers generally are the most grueling taskmasters to themselves. more than anything. So I think that combination has really made people realize and reevaluate, what is this all about? What's the meaning of life, in this context? Tim, you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I put my hand up to when you mentioned about having children that haven't seen grandparents. I think what you said there, John, I feel for me personally, and with colleagues here, it's the unknown at the moment, isn't it? That's what had people on edge here in Hong Kong. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was going to happen in a month's time, let alone 6 months' time. We can't plan our summer breaks. What are we doing at Christmas? All these things that we took for granted before. I think then just has our stress level. It changes everything then. Where you'd get frustrated at the littlest things, and you could start seeing that everywhere. So it's a big thing. And this is tech aside. I mean, tech took whatever, it was that idea. Now we need to start looking after each other and looking out for each other. And we started to do it here more than we used to before. If it does on a tech aspect, we used to have unplugged days. Well, now we realize we can't function in an unplugged world. So it's like we've renamed it media balance. We need to get that balance right about what we're doing on devices. Are we able to switch off from our devices when we need to? Is it that kind of thing? That's what we're looking for. And that's with my role that I'm trying to support the wellbeing team or what have you. But it's a big thing.
I think it's so interesting, Tim, that you had unplugged and now it's about media balance, because I think what happened, a lot of parents, all of us, we became addicted to Netflix, online shopping, online delivery, Uber Eats. So is this something that you're working with your parent community and your faculty, this idea, the fact is the screens are there. We can't get rid of them. So let's maybe have a different disposition than just unplugging?
Yeah, I think it's that and I've mentioned this before, possibly on one of the conversations we've had, where that I'm not a big fan of a digital citizenship week, because it seems to be we focus on it this week and we forget about it for the rest of the year. Yeah. So it's that kind of thing where we're trying to do smaller things, but more often throughout the year then. And involve everybody in the community, especially if there are these hybrid models, these students are at home. The parents need to be aware of this as well. So let alone when it comes, we're looking at that with digital citizenship and keeping students safe online. But it's just taken another angle now where we are having to use devices. We're just look at us now. Do you know what I mean? But now we need to be a bit more mindful about how we're using devices for the sake.
It's kind of depressing that we can't have device-free days or anything, isn't it? It's like it's a sign of like life in 2022.
But even that, Dan, I think we can do it. But for me, I just feel it's more sustainable and it has more impact if we can try and stagger things out, or we don't want it to turn into the last Friday of February is a device-free day, because then we go back to how we were before. So we are trying to look at seeing what has impact and what can actually make a difference. Again, John mentioned there's no right answer, otherwise this conversation won't be happening. But it's that idea of how can we reflect on things and how we can actually look to make some changes moving forward.
Well, Tim, you're really, and which I think is so true, is you're looking at how can we make this sustainable, this more balanced approach than having one-hit wonders, and then we're on for nonstop for 24 hours. I mean, it's a bit, you don't drink for a day and then you go to the cabinet and empty it every day. So no, absolutely. I think that's such an important approach, is that kind of, sustainability. And that sounds like what you guys are trying to do in your context, is to how do we make this sustainable and really nail the behaviors, those triggers that get us to always be online.
It's habits, isn't it, then, if we can change habits?
There's actually practical things as well. I mean, just as your phone becomes like a ubiquitous device for everything. I mean, I'm probably at the ridiculous end of the spectrum. Like, my phone is my car key and it is my key for my office, which is kind of, I actually cannot function without my phone. So I couldn't get into my car and I couldn't get into my office, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I started thinking about this afterwards, like, what am I doing? I have to have my phone. And when you've got your phone on, you get your alerts, you get everything, and it's definitely not good for mental health.
Can I say that
too, right? So
what's that, sorry?
Because it's your wallet too, right? For most people, I mean.
Yeah, of course, yes, wallet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I only pay with the phone now. Apple Pay. I don't even have my wallet with me.
I was just going to say, not all screen time is the same, right? And it's not all equal. And I think that's what probably Tim is mentioning. That's what we're trying to find is a balance, because like you said, there's things that we have to do to function. And then there's things where you're on a concentrated, stare pattern, right? Where you're staring at the screen for, extended periods of time, like in a Zoom call or, Google Meet call. But yeah, I know we have to have that chat as well. So I'm completely with you. And I live in Korea, where everything is, we have 5G free Wi-Fi all over, outside, everywhere. So it is everything, right? And so for someone to not have a phone is weird, or to not have a device is weird. And so, it's very, very difficult to change